Hi, and welcome back. We're doing our learning of the Mishnah on Shabbat. We're at the end of chapter 11. We'll be doing 5 and 6, Hey and Bav. Okay, Hazorek min hayam la yabasha, umin hayabasha la yam, umin hayam la svina, umin hasvina la yam, umin hasvina la chaverta, pator. One who throws from the sea to the dry land, and from the dry land to the sea, from the sea to the ship, to a ship, and from the ship to the sea, or from one ship to another, is exempt. So what are we talking about here? Remember, we're talking about in order to be liable on a Torah level, it needs to be from private to public domain, and none of these are an example of that. So from sea to dry land, last week we had mentioned, or last time we learned, I believe last week, we mentioned that the sea is a Carmelite, this kind of in-between space between public and private. So from sea to dry land is from Carmelite to public, and the other way around is public to Carmelite. And from sea to ship is from Carmelite to a private domain, or the other way around, private domain to Carmelite. And from one ship to another is private to private domain. Okay, so none of those fit the requirements of being private to public. Sfinot kshurot zo v'zo, mitaltlin mizo lezo. If ships are tied together, we can move things from one ship to another. Im einan kshurot af al pi she mukafot ein mitaltlin mizo lezo. So if they're not tied together, even though they're close to one another, we cannot move things from one to another. So this is talking about in order for it to be permissible, not just like in the last example when we were saying these are things that are, the previous cases that we discussed would still be rabbinically problematic, but were exempt from a Torah level prohibition because they weren't private to public. Now we're talking about, in this case, there's a way that this could be done where it's actually totally permissible, which would be if the ships were tied together. It's like an Eruv Chatzerot. It's like saying that we have actually combined these two private domains. If they're not tied together, it wouldn't qualify as that. It needs to be like substantially together, have some kind of clear passageway, and therefore one would not be allowed to pass things from one to another. Okay, 6. Hazorek v'nizkar la'achar shiatzta miyado kalata acher kalata kelev o shenisrefa pator. One who threw something and reminded himself after it had left his hand, or another person caught it, or a dog caught it, or it was burnt in flight while it was going, he is exempt. Okay, so now what are we talking about? So we talked about, I think previously at some point, the principle that only an unintentional violation of Shabbat requires a sin offering. It's kind of like a privilege to make atonement in this way if it was unintentional, but if there's any aspect of intentionality in the action, then therefore one would not be allowed to, or privileged, liable a sin offering. So one who threw something and reminded himself, so meaning he remembers at that moment that it's Shabbat, that he's doing something that's a violation while it's already in air, so he can't do anything to change the situation, but still the action itself, within the action there's awareness and intentionality, and therefore no sin offering. What about it says if another person caught it, then therefore there's two people doing the malach. It's not one person doing it intentionally fully themselves, or a dog caught it, or if it's burnt in flight, so it never has a proper landing the object in order to be a complete action. So the action needs to be completed, and there needs to be some action aspect of intentionality in it to have the sin offering. Zarak la'asot chabura bein v'adam uvein v'behema v'nizkar ad shelo na'asa chabura patur. So if one threw a stone or some other kind of object with the intention of making a wound, of hurting a person or an animal, and then he reminded himself when the wound had not been inflicted, so this is very similar. He remembers it's Shabbat, or you're not supposed to do that on Shabbat, then he would be exempt. And here we're going to understand, we're going to be given, the Mishnah is going to give us the more general principle instead of just different cases. Ze haklal. Here is the rule, the general principle. Kol chayavei chatot einan chayavin ad shetehei techilatan v'sofan shegaga. Techilatan shegaga v'sofan zadon. Techilatan zadon v'sofan shegaga pturin ad shetehei techilatan v'sofan shegaga. So this is the general principle. All who are liable for sin offerings are not liable unless the beginning and the end of their acts are both inadvertent. If the beginning was inadvertent but the end was intentional, or the other way around, the beginning was intentional but the end was inadvertent, they are exempt. They're not given this opportunity to atone by means of a sin offering. So they're exempt unless their beginning and their end are both inadvertent. Okay, that is the end of chapter 11. So we'll begin chapter 12 next week. Okay, bye everyone.